Cynthia Nasaki, Rahel Tete, Daniela Adote of Bishop High. The students were taken through rehearsal by Mr. Justice Kronipa, Accra Metro Cultural Coordinator. Mr. Ken Bonso, Ablokuma Central Cultural Coordinator, and Mrs. Carol Agbemabiase of Kimbo Senior High Technical, coordinated by Richard Mausi Blute, the Greater Accra Regional Coordinator. This was under the careful supervision of Mrs. Joyce Afre Nwama, Director, National.
So we've come to the segment where we want to discuss activities of the Independence Parade at the Independence Square here in Accra. But remember, we want to discuss what happened at the parade grounds from a non-partisan angle. We want to look at it from a perspective where our guest in the studio, Chief Moment, who is a writer and a creative arts person, will do an introspection and digest the issues and the activities that took place at the Independence Parade grounds. We'll speak to some other analysts on Skype and also stream them through the phone. We'll also have playbacks in between, interspersed that with various speeches by notable people we also interviewed on the grounds. But relatively, we would want to look at the relevance, look at the national issues that were talked about by the president, but more importantly, some of the things that happened. For example, the president had to speak after 1 p.m., we're told. And then definitely that got a lot more people exhausted at the time. Would they have affected perhaps the digestion of the content of his speech and all that? But beyond that, Justice Beidou had returned from Northern Ghana, and when he was there, he put together a series of reports about how women are being empowered. And we know tomorrow is International Women's Day, and for the whole of the week, the AM show is going to focus on women making their lives beneficial to society. And this time we're focusing through the use of making bamboo bags. Now, these bags have been received worldwide and international acclamation. And guests in the studio will help us do a lot more discussions on the subject. And Frank Boja is a program manager in charge of governance at WorldDAV that is helping us know how to sustain this endeavor and also empower the women in many respects. So that's what we will be looking at. But Maxwell Agbagwa, we've sent him on an errand. He's roving for us this morning. The Ghana Armed Forces, they have what they call the Open Day celebrations each year. And this is what they do. They tend to take the public, especially young people and adults, through what they do either on land, on sea, etc. And they take you through some level of simulations. So you get to know perhaps how to fire a gun, how they go to the ranges, how you can fly an aircraft and all that, just to get people and the public acquainted with their activities. The intention of the Open Day by the Ghana Armed Forces is to foster public as well as civil relations with the Ghana Armed Forces, and also make sure that the public is closer to the activities, the objectives, and the intent of the Ghana Armed Forces. So it's all well and good, and Maxwell Agbagwa will be helping us do those roving activities this morning. But that's where we have to take you back to the Independence Square. We'll bring you some live insights from the speeches of the President Akufo-Addo, as well as some notable personalities we interviewed there.
Prem Amu, Tata Amu, as he was fondly called. He was the composer of what easily passes as our unofficial national anthem, Yeya Sasieni. Is there a Ghanaian amongst us today who can hear or sing that song in whichever language without being moved? Ephraim Amu stood alone most of the time against what he saw as cultural domination. You did not have to wear a European cut suit to be a scholar. I pay homage today to Kwejia Agre. He reminded us we were eagles that should soar and not be timid, domesticated birds. I pay homage to Philip Beho, the composer of our national anthem, Theodosia Oko, the designer of our national flag, and Amon Kote, the designer of our coat of arms. I pay homage to Kofi Antobam, the artist who first put Ghanaian artists on the map. I pay homage to Saka Akwe, the poet, writer, sculptor and musician who wrote the first African folklore, The Lost Fisherman. I pay homage to J.A. Brymer, the Gonja scholar and statesman who wrote insightful publications about the Gonja people. I pay homage to the poet Apalu, who immortalized the philosophy and music of the Ekwe language. I pay homage to E.T. Manson, King Bruce, Jerry Hansen, and the others who popularized high life, which has become an enduring identity of Ghanaian music.
And so the President Akufo-Addo, speaking about some of the notable personalities who have not only graced our land, but also contributed significantly to the socio-economic development of our country. But what does it mean to many of us, especially those contemporaries and those who want to forge ahead, create the needed future leadership for our country? And we would want to look at the content of his speech, as well as a number of activities that took place. We have political scientists with Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology with the Political Science Department, and Dr. Edward Brenya is joining me through the stream. A very good morning to you, sir. Good morning, Dr. Brenya. Good morning, Dr. Brenya. Good morning, Dr. Brenya. Well, so we have to bring you back that interaction with Dr. Edward Brenya. He is with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology Political Science Department, and then we will try as much as possible to speak to him. Good morning to you, Dr. Brenya. Good morning to you, Dr. Brenya. Well, we have to go back to the Independence Square. We'll bring you another insert from the event.
The next significant event in the struggle occurred on 4th August 1947, exactly 50 years later to the day of the formation of the Aborigines Rights Protection Society, when a group of nationalists gathered in Salpond for the launch of the United Gold Coast Convention, the UGCC, the first political party in our country. The founders of the UGCC then met to demand independence from the British, and 70 years after that event, one still marvels at the clarity of thought and the passion that they displayed. Some of the names of that momentous day have survived in our written history and folklore. 5 of them are on our Ghanaian currency: Joseph Boache Dankwa, Emmanuel Obese-Bilante, William Oforiatta, Ebenezer Akwaje, and Edward Akufo-Addo. Kwame Nkrumah, the 6th of the big currency on the currency, the big 6 on the currency, was to join them later.
We have on the line Dr. Edward Brenya, a political scientist with the KNUS. That's the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Now, particularly, what would you say summarily about the content of the speech of the president?
I'm sorry, I heard the good morning, but I'm losing your voice.
Okay, I wanted your view on overall what your observations were about the content of the speech of the president.
Or the celebration. Good morning to the everyone listeners of Joy News. I think that the celebration that we have witnessed yesterday was a very beautiful celebration. As the president did promise that it was going to be a modest celebration. I thought it was nice seeing all the past presidents gathered, having presidents from neighboring countries join us, Mugabe around, other visitors. I thought it was a beautiful display of how far we've come. And I thought that the message that was delivered by the president is a message that should somehow send a word of advice to Ghanaians. We are 60 years. Ghana is retiring, but we don't know what we are moving to after we retire. And I think this is a time for us to sort of assess ourselves, change our attitude, and be on the edge of actually getting Ghana to be where it should be 60 years after independence.
We know significantly The president, and if you look at the newspapers this morning, the highlights have been about how, as a country, we have the potential, and so we didn't need to be where we are. What about that?
I'm really sorry. Your voice is faint again.
I'm saying that if you look at the headlines this morning, okay, you get to find that many of the headlines have focused on the content or the aspects of the speech that said that Ghana had so much resources and potential, and so didn't or shouldn't have been where it is today, and that we could have had a lot more development than we're witnessing.
I can hear you better now. I heard you say the headline, but I didn't hear what you said afterwards. I'm sorry, I'm in a bus.
Okay, we seem to be having some difficulty. We have to take a break from you, but Dr. Edward Brenya will call you back, and we hope that we can re-establish the clarity of the line when we call you back, so that we'll have some great discussions. And it's not just our focus on the celebrations on Monday. That's the 6th of March 2017. That's the Independence Day parade that took place at the Independence Square here in Accra, in which we had a number of activities to support the main event, and it climaxed with the speech of the president. And this morning we've had many of the headlines reading, for example, on the front page of the Daily Graphic says, "Let's build on common bonds to promote prosperous Ghana." You look at some other headlines also said that we have no excuse to be poor, according to the president and a number of others. But what really can we take from the event? The other side attractions, were they necessary? For example, there's all the talk about on social media, especially the president, his vice, and a number of some notable people in government not wearing the anniversary cloth, for example. And if they didn't wear, was it a sign of good leadership? If we're saying that the general public should patronize the cloth or the ceremonial cloth for the year-long activity, but the top leadership for the main event, that is on Monday, not putting on the cloth, what does it mean? For example, the actors from Kumawood, they put together a sketch, you know, and we're told that some of the content in terms of, if you look at the lines of the actors or the characters themselves, some of the things they said, was it for good consumption of the viewing public or the listening public, etc. So those are some of the things we'll be talking about. And so we'll be having in the studio Chief Mumen. Chief Mumen is a playwright, is a creative arts person, and we know that he puts together the play Wogba Jeke, and we'll be having him in the studio. He's also an analyst in his own right. So, but let's get back to Dr. Edward Brenya, a political scientist with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Okay, so we'll try as much as possible get him back on the line. But let's now watch an insight from the president.
We have agreed on a multi-party constitutional democracy and a guarantee of individual freedoms under the rule of law. These past 24 years have been the longest period of political stability our country has enjoyed since independence, and the effects are gradually showing. The pace of our development has quickened, and our self-confidence, which had been severely restrained, has returned. Sadly, the economic dividend that was meant to accompany our freedom has still not materialized. 60 years after those heady days, the mass of our people are still poor. After 16 years, we have run out of excuses, and it is time to set Ghana to rights and get our country to where it should be. It is worth mentioning some of the names of the members of the society, because unfortunately, we do not often acknowledge their role. John Mensah Saba, Joseph Casely Hayford, J.W. Say, J.P. Brown, and their colleagues, who organized the chiefs and people against the Crown Lands Bill and forced the colonial authorities to retreat. Saba began the tradition of the Ghanaian lawyer as a nationalist. This was probably one of the most dramatic interventions in the colonial history of our country. 120 years after the event, its significance might be lost on us. But we would appreciate its importance if we consider that the very same objectives of the Crown Lands Bill were introduced at the same time and became law in countries like Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and some other British colonies around Africa, and changed the course of their history.
The event started with the arrival of contingents and the general public. The arrivals continued for 2 hours, with the president eventually showing up at 10 o'clock a.m. for the ceremony to officially get underway. By that time, former President Jerry John Rawlings, John Agyekum Kufuor, and John Dramani Mahama had already taken their seats in the VVIP stand. One of those rare occasions Ghanaians get to see all three surviving presidents at the same place. Out of the 14 African countries that confirmed their participation Sunday evening, only Zimbabwean presidents Robert Mugabe and Faure Gnassingbé of Togo showed up, with the other countries sending representations. But all of VVIPs were spared the heat from the scorching sun that the rest of the contingent had to endure for the several hours that the parade lasted, so that by the time the president started his speech, several of the contingents had collapsed.
Akufo-Addo. Ladies and gentlemen, the drum appellation is done.
Not even the officers with their weeks of drills during their training could withstand the heat. Perhaps organizers would want to consider ways to minimize the slums that often characterize parades of this nature. Latif Idris, Joy News, Accra. The event started with the arrival of contingents and
So all those events highlighting activities at the Independence Day parade that took place on Monday, that's the 6th of March, 2017. And we know that it is expected to be a year-long of activities to mark Ghana 60. But some highlights of the side attractions of the event have become talking point for social media. But again, the content of the president's speech really did a lot of wonders. No wonder they're occupying the front pages of the newspapers. And no better way, Mamavi, to look at it than having great discussions with those who matter and know a lot more about the arts and what people think and the minds of people when it comes to deliveries of speeches and sideline attractions.
Yeah, so let's just welcome Chief Moment, who is a creator of Wogbejeke. And you staged the play again.
Yes, from Friday to Monday, we did the marathon staging of Wogbejeke. We first did it on Friday for the Ghana 60th anniversary committee, and they invited their guests to come and see it at the conference center. And on Saturday, on Sunday, we did our own shows at the amphitheater of the University of Ghana. For the first time in Wogbejeke history, we had a full house, which was exceedingly impressive, and the audience left with a lot of excitement. And yesterday on Monday, we did a free show at the Accra Mall as our own Independence Day celebrations and support to the nation, and people came out to see us. So it has been a marathon 4 days of exciting Wogbejeke activities.
Amazing. Why did I think I was going to see it at Independence Square? There were talks like that before. That Wogbejeke will be on the ground.
Okay, then I probably didn't follow. We did it on Friday. But since we did it over the weekends, there's been a lot of positive response because a lot more people have gotten to see it. A lot more people are talking about it. So we are planning to stage it again, hopefully before the month ends at the National Theatre. Okay. So you might get to see. I know you haven't seen Wogbejeke.
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. And I'm not proud.
I'm not sure you have.
I'm not
but there will be ample opportunity. I think that this has been our best production so far. And I'm very grateful to our cast and crew, and of course our sponsor Keysop, who has made this all possible.
So is it, do you retweak or what, or you're telling the same history?
This one, what we did was that we put all the history together You know, when we started Heritage Theatre Series, we started by putting the history one. So we did the pre-colonial history, the coming and the settlement of the various ethnic groups. That was Ogbejeke, the birth of a nation. Then we did A Tale of Two Men, which was the story of Ghana's independence struggle last year. So what we did was that we put the first and second play, and even the other plays we hadn't done. So what we did was we told the entire story of Ghana, the history from ancient to modern times, from Panogo to Azonto, from Nkrumah to Nanado.
Oh, okay.
And it was beautiful.
It was massive.
Yeah, and I'm very impressed, and I'm truly honored and grateful to be working with talented people. We had a cast and crew of about 170 people this time around, and everyone gave
How'd you
up
get to pay them?
That's huge.
That is the question.
Or they do a lot more voluntary work?
This time we're paying every single individual. So thanks to our sponsor, thanks to the committee that commissioned us to do the project on Friday. I mean, everyone will eventually be paid.
They haven't been paid yet. That's the big.
So we have our Gwajaka Awards night on Sunday, so that's where everything will be settled.
Okay, let's talk about yesterday, though, Monday at the Independence Square.
At the Independence Square.
How much of it did you watch?
Well, I was in my room and I was following in and out. You know, I was very particular about the speech because for me, because of where I come from, the speech is very important. But pretty much, I try to follow as much as possible, so I have a general impression of the ceremony.
They did warn us, though, that they were going to have some cultural displays and other things attached to it. Were you impressed?
Yeah, I mean, my good friend Niyate, he did a lot of choreography on that day. I think that his performance was spot on. And considering the time that he had, we started working together just around the time. You know, we must start from the premise that this whole planning of the 60th anniversary has been really very short because of the elections and the change of administration. We barely had a couple of weeks to put together such a great occasion. So I think that the real, meat in the matter will be the subsequent events. So probably we shouldn't see this particular Independence Day ceremony as the benchmark of the entire 60th anniversary, because really the committee didn't have a lot of time.
You belong to the same school of thought.
Yeah. So I mean,
sit on the same committee.
No. We are kindred
Did she coach
spirits.
you?
Really?
Because this slide looks like a refrain I had
from
an hour before.
No, I just put one or two together and I came up, that same conclusion. That's what he's talking about.
Even I'm not a big state organization or anything. 2 years ago, I knew exactly what I wanted to do for my 60th anniversary, Ghana's 60th anniversary. And so when we launched Work Budget, we said we're working towards the 60th anniversary. And even before that, last year I had a lot of proposals. I was knocking on doors, but there was so much uncertainty, no one would pay attention. So even when dealing with the committee, it was just like a couple of weeks. So for me, from where I sit, I realized that they didn't have enough time to put. But that does not mean that, I don't think the show was a disaster. I think that it was good in its own right. I felt it was long. I think a lot of people have that impression because we had come from a point where the Independence Day celebration had been cut. I think the march passes were too many, and like most people think, the Kumawood drama section we could have done without it. You see, it's difficult to put together a sketch in such a large-scale environment. Usually when people tell me that, oh, can you put together a sketch for us I'm very particular about what kind of occasion, because...
Why, is it because of the acoustics? Or the sound?
Performance arts, whether you're doing poetry, whether you're doing dance, dance is a bit more free because it's visual, but performance art that deals with oratory, dialogues, you need some kind of a concentration and an environment that is conducive with a large public square like that, and people spread over there. The intimacy is not really appropriate for drama.
The what?
Intimacy, the kind of audience feel and how they can feel the emotion. So I felt
intimacy.
But there were points where, especially when Ejako started to talk, where people were cheering, which meant that they understood what.
Well, no, Ejako is just a popular character. So whether he's without even saying anything substantive in what he's saying, just his appearance alone. But I'm imagining that other dignitaries, the eyes of the world was on us. It wasn't really, really necessary, unless we wanted to satisfy a particular constituency to say that, look, the independence celebration is not just for those who are invited, it's for people around, it's for people all over our country who enjoy these characters. Imagine if Lil Wayne had shown his face. Of course, it would have been that, people would have cheered on. So I felt like like most people think, that particular one could have been dealt with, because I don't think it was as impactful as she might have realized. But beyond that, I thought it could have also been compressed. But I thought, of course, Nana's speech was spot on. I was watching with a friend of mine who said, hey, Nana is giving our Budget speech because of the historical antecedent, like how he stated the earlier people who fought, for our rights and all that. So I thought Nana's speech was spot on. The delivery, of course, he's an orator in his own right, and in terms of the speech, it was spot on. But I felt it could have been compressed a bit, and a few things could have been done away, such as the letter.
We'll come back to the speech. I know that you've been following a lot of history. Some people say he told a certain history that we didn't know about, or he was reinventing something. I'll ask you about that. But I want us to, Roland, just catch what we've just talked about in terms of the play that was staged at the Independence Square.
Hey, and I'm for school near grown and school here. Why? Me to get the papa so I didn't him. Money am I menu. Hello. Hello. Aflakume. Hello. Yayai. Mesanabu. Ado. Many. Ah, Miss and say, no, no, the kind. Say, oh, Bob Watman. So good now, we're giant. And yet, money and cock. As you my squeak. Oh, I saw Sen had the best you had ya. Mercy you. Sen had the best you had ya. Mercy you. Please, I know I've been a bachelor above Flannery. Send me to a Naman Jessica, Namadia Mammy Baba said, won't go school, and for Swabe. And for Swabe and I was what? Mimi do a Baba Sukuno, me the Betty Chibom, Namari. Oh, me buy a barco, and I'm a or Babaco, Bama Baco, Bama and Comuan Siamin and Sanity. No, come away here, who shall hear to have money. Major, what your damn head? Mimi, to a bit hour. Big problem coming soon to you. Big problem coming soon to you. Coming soon to you. He said, me for a bank to school. Na me to a na me baba or demwa. Now, Quabia Chinano Salco, who are betting at energy. No, I bet fun. You will watch it. I did come now, meaning the move. I'm about one on it. I day. Send behind me, Kakra. Send by watch him. I will come back. So, watch him as a come back. So, quite in answer, my watch him. Oh, ready. I see your go business in your way. Missy Canabano, me play me call Nana, Yademami, about the Obey, you say, hey, and let me catch us. I brought you over the school. Also, as my boy, I'm a power demand. I want you. I've seen you. No problem. Morning. What do you want born Miss into me? I didn't want many months. About how many? I didn't buy. Me cost school now, send me bedroom. Oh, me baby. When you see car, so mommy class. Yeah, man, nonsense. Hey. Papa, to the animal have one. Get to a man or woman. Wow.
Okay, so that's the drama that we've been talking about. This happened as part of the celebrations yesterday on the grounds at the Independence Square. There were no translations though. It was purely in a can. And there were issues here and there, but what was the import of this play really? I think it was talking about education. How many people at the square understood what the drama was?
Well, that's what I said. Maybe it was speaking to a particular constituency because Kumawood is big across Ghana. So probably those people who are very fond of Kumawood, when they see the Kumawood stars, they will feel a part of the celebration. If you look at it from that point of view, you can provide a justification. But if you look at it from the point of view of the elegance of the events, with the president, charged the committee to put up in terms of the whole celebrations, I still feel that you could have done without a sketch. If they wanted their presence, they could have found quite an innovative way of including them, whether in a match pass or something. But to give them a sketch point in the whole event, I thought could have been done away with.
Yeah, considering the fact that there were celebrations across the country as well.
Absolutely.
And this was the national one.
Yeah, national one. Absolutely.
With the international guests.
Yeah, I'm sure people are like, what is going on? But all the same, I don't think, it was such a disaster anyway, but we could have done away with it.
Okay, let's talk about the speech now.
Yes.
But before we go on to the speech, your expertise just go beyond playwriting and because of the kind of studies you've undertaken. If the dramas and the sketches and all that are put into main events, what are their significance, let's say, for a march pass or a parade to mark, let's say, a country's birth or something of the sort, or for any other event?
First of all, you want a diversity of activities on any of such an occasion that you organize. You just don't want people to come and give speeches, become boring and tiring. So you look for exciting ways of engaging the audience and engaging the crowd, and the arts presents you with this opportunity. Wherever you go around the world, when people are celebrating their days, it's also an opportunity for them to display their rich culture and their heritage, and all of these add color to an event. So definitely, as Ghanaians, when we are doing our ceremonies, we have our drums, we have our dance, we have our music. It's about how we package and present them. And I felt that in terms of the way we packaged it for the drama section, what Niyate did was good. The costumes were on point, for example. The choreography was on point. It's just that drama is enhanced by the environment. So if it was probably in an enclosed space with the light and the sound and everything, it would give it more emotional effect. But considering the challenges of an open air environment which is wide, I told you that for art to be effective, you need intimacy. If you want to communicate emotionally to people, that connection is there. So probably because of the wideness of the square, you might not get that intimacy that you want, unless you are going for flamboyance. That's why when they are doing, when they are launching, let's say, a football match, like World Cup, and the opening ceremony is in the night, so you can play with the light, and so it gives it that level of flamboyance. But there's really little you can do when it is the daytime, and all you have is just the microphone and your own selves. But given the circumstances, I thought that Niyate was able to do it quite well. And I feel that every event that you have, you also always find innovative ways of making it exciting. So the cultural bit, performances would always be an integral part of what we do.
Is this something that we must keep going forward?
Well, I don't see any reason not, because all around the world, people, if you go to Japan, you go to China, when they are doing these things, it's an opportunity to exhibit where you have come from. Unless we all want to come there in suits and ties and, talk and drink tea and leave, then we are losing some bit of our identity. But these things reinforce who we are as a people and make us understand that we have some cultural practices that find themselves expression in the way we dance or sing, and we show them at our events. So whether we go to funerals or outdoorings or national events, these things will continue to be there. And for me, I don't feel, I've heard people say that, in Ghana or in Africa, we like singing and dancing too much. But it really is not a peculiar African issue. All around the world, people have different ways of expressing themselves. If you go to, the country in the United Kingdom, Scotland, they have their bagpipes. The British have an elaborate, system when it comes to their monarchy, the way they do things, the way they march past, the way they blow things, even their weddings. So those are intrinsic to their culture, and they found ways of making it a part of their society. So there's no way we would also sit and say, let us forget our doors and our drums and our pan logos, because we want to what, So it's part of who we are, and it's part of our expression. And when you take these expressions out, then we become bare and barren.
What do you make of the president's speech in its entirety?
Well, I think it was a great speech. I've had a lot of discussions around it, and I follow social media. How people were... And this is one thing that we put in our production. We had a part we called Heroes and Traitors. So we kind of like depicted the argument around the independence time against Nkrumah and J.B. Dankwa. And people belonging to the J.B. Dankwa stock would like to showcase the contribution of their political tradition to Ghana's independence struggle, and people in the CPP tradition would try to showcase what the UGC did to frustrate our independence. But for me, I think we have gotten to the point in our history that we cannot continue to perpetuate the acrimony. The wounds of that era have not healed, and they will never heal, especially for those who lived through the generation. I'm actually quoting a poem from
so this is what
especially for those who lived through the era. But for the younger generation coming up, we must look at the history dispassionately and understand the failings of our founding fathers, but project the values that inspired their liberation. If we can deliver that free and just society that Dankwa died for, and that prosperous and industrialized nation that Nkrumah fought for, then we would have created a community that they both dreamed of. And that's the point. So the point generally is that we will never get to a consensus among that part. And I feel that, in truth, Nkrumah is not the be and all of our independence struggle. Before he came, there were a lot of work that other people did. The president talked about the John Says and the Mensa Sabas, who worked to prevent our land from being taken over by the British. Probably the reason why Ghana is not South Africa or Zimbabwe is because of what they did. In South Africa and Zimbabwe, the whites were able to take over their lands, over 70%, and they wanted to do that with Ghana. But John Say and Mensa Sabas, working through the Aborigines Right Protection Society, were able to curtail that. So definitely the president gave a lot of emphasis to those people who worked before Nkrumah. Of course, you cannot change the fact that when Nkrumah came into Gold Coast politics, he changed the dynamics of Gold Coast politics. I mean, there was a lot of excitement he brought. He was able to mobilize the people and push them. So he was the man who took the baton and ran the final lap. But definitely before he came, people laid, the path. And I think so for both political traditions, we must be able to come to a consensus and understand that, yes, our leaders had their failings. People think that the Nana-Addo administration is now trying to project the Danko Busia side of it. But because, I mean, Nkrumah has been projected, and he will always be. Maybe in Ghana, we need that balance. But across the world, no one would remember JB.
But should the balance be coming from this administration, knowing the connection?
But who should it come from? I mean, that is his uncle. He lived through those times. So he personally feels that his forebears played an important role in Ghana's independence struggle, in the nationhood of our country. So definitely, he more than anyone will be a champion of that. What as Ghanaians we should be particular of is that in his attempt to give his forebears their right place in history, he does not obliterate the work of others, or he does not, downplay the work of others. If we feel that he's working towards a balance, then yes, for me, I can tolerate
What do you feel, that he's working towards a balance?
So far, I don't think, it's early days yet, but in the speech, I think it cut across. He acknowledged Nkrumah, he acknowledged Dankwa, and of course, all those other people who work for our liberation struggle. But if in the course of time we feel that there is, an uncanny effort to project probably the Danko Busia tradition over a particular tradition, then maybe people might have cause to. But my point is that for Ghana, we always have this discussion. But around the world, when it comes to African liberation, Pan-Africanism is Nkrumah's name, because he won elections, overwhelming elections. He took our nation to independence. So invariably, in the new space, the person who will get more mentions, if Dankwa and Nkrumah were alive in our time, the person who will get more mentions and more retweets will definitely be Nkrumah. But that does not mean that other political tradition, the people like Pa Grant, who as a timber merchant invested his money and his resources in helping to form the first political party. Let's not forget that the UGCC played an important role in bringing Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. But the interesting thing is that the various political activists were working towards Ghana's independence since the early 40s. Within 2 years after Nkrumah came to Ghana, after joining the UGCC, he broke away to form the CPP. Within 2 years after forming the CPP, he won a general election. So within 4 years of coming to Ghana, he changed the dynamics of Gold Coast politics in such a way that people who had been working for over 2 decades had not. And that's what makes me an excited
Is that
character.
A poem too?
It's not a poem. Yeah. And there's a very poignant moment in our production. So in our production, we introduce all of these nationalist leaders, John Say, Mensa Saba, J.B. Dankwa. But when Nkrumah comes on stage, the energy level stops. It increases by the fold.
He galvanized,
yes.
actually.
So for me, I always find it very instructive. And I felt that it was really representative of what happened in the Gold Coast in the 40s. The Dankwas were doing their thing, but it was cool. Yeah, let's do this, let's do it. But Nkrumah came and suddenly you know, the excitement.
But they always say that for all eras in civilization, we've always had heroes. So you look at the Roman Empire, it epitomizes how strong a virtue and a character Caesar was. You look at the French Revolution, and it talks about the people as against King Louis. And then you talk about all the great wars that Napoleon Bonaparte took part, and all those great wars that he won. You talk about the American struggle over slavery and their independence. George Washington is there, and then their struggle following those wars, and Abraham Lincoln is a pivotal factor.
So there's always a hero.
So there's always somebody who becomes a pivotal person.
Absolutely.
For example, in South Africa, Nelson Mandela had been in jail for 27 years. He virtually did nothing within those years. But it was his name and his flame that kept Thabo and the rest of the people who were working behind him, and after Thabo left for the prisons and came out and helped him, etc., to do the work of improving the state of South Africa as it is today. And you always have somebody to carry the flame. Why do we want to have people carry the flame instead of somebody?
I don't think
even the Olympic torch is carried by one person.
I'm not sure that people. Well, look, I've said this. Nkrumah will always be outstanding, just by virtue of the fact that he was the man who ran the final lap, and he was the man who became president from 51, like head of state from 51, 57, all the way to 66. He would always carry the torch, and a lot more people around the world would remember his name. So I would not be too perturbed. I don't think that a particular administration can do anything. Look, the kind of propaganda that was used against Nkrumah for his overthrow and even all that stuff, but still Nkrumah, in quotes, never dies. So I don't think that there's anything wrong in also creating other spaces. You talked about the United States. Well, of course, we know the Washingtons, we know the Hamiltons, we know the Lincolns. I mean, there's so many, we know the Martin Luthers. Everyone has their space. And one thing about the United States of America is that even though they have come from a difficult history, when it comes to their founding fathers, they have a consensus on their founding fathers. Look, George Washington and co, they were all slave traders. Well, they had slaves, not slave traders. They had slaves in their house. But these days, when we are talking about them, we don't really talk about that aspect of their history. When we are talking about America, we don't talk about the aspect of their history that had to do with the extermination of, you know, a wide population of Indians. We talk about the great America that settled and won its freedom from imperialist Britain. Culture is, nation building is about propaganda. Because any nation in this world will have terrible things in its history. But what do you want your people to live away with? What impression do you want your people to have? So there's a level of propaganda that must come into nation building, positive one. And for us, our propaganda should be that in spite of the challenges of our founding fathers, because the bitterness is, people have still not forgiven the Danko-Buze tradition for the overthrow of Nkrumah. They call them, that they were in cahoots with the European powers to overthrow Nkrumah, and the bitterness is still there. The Danko-Buze tradition will never forgive Nkrumah for imprisoning J.B. Danko and for J.B. Danko dying in prison. Regardless of whatever you think, I think that there were some actions that the Nkrumah administration took that were avoidable, and that would have given it a freedom of, you know, some kind of an image. So in both sides, and for me, to be honest with you, I grew up an Nkrumahist. Not because I grew up in an Nkrumahist family or a very political family that was, you know, that had that impression about, just because of my reading of history. The man just stood out. Nobody told me anything about Danko or Nkrumah. Nobody said this one is a hero and this one is a traitor. But just out of an interest in history and reading how people evolved and what he stood for, Nkrumah stood out for me, and I became sort of an Nkrumahist. But that was in my GSS days and SS days when I was an activist, and in my early university days when there was a lot of vim and fire and idealism. But
the fire died?
Oh no, no, die. I'm mature. But as I became more mature and I read more, I began to understand that even though Nkrumah for me is still a hero, we cannot, you know, we cannot cover the spaces that others also, other contributions.
I like your character. You're more like a peacemaker.
Well,
sometimes I mean, you don't want to hit the nail right on the head.
But we don't have an option.
Yeah,
that's why
for country unity.
Do you have the sense that our children are interested in our history, because history for a very long time has become like a very boring subject.
Absolutely.
Who wants to read all those things? But when you tell the story the way that you tell it, it's kind of interesting.
Yes, and that's the aim of our story, to incite an interest. And for me, I wouldn't want to use my production or my stage to further, create acrimony and differences. As I said, look, I come from an Nkrumah stock, and I believed in his vision. And by virtue of the fact that he became first president, he will always have a bigger space than any other person. But I've also come to understand that if we are going to build this nation, we have to create spaces for others. Even if it's out of magnanimity, it has to happen. Other than that, the unity that we are looking for and the cohesion that we are looking for, will not be there. And for us younger generation, that's why I said it shouldn't matter. Maybe for the likes of Nana-Addo and his peers, because they lived through the time because his uncle died in jail, that bitterness will still be there. But for us, a younger generation, we can really take a look at the history from a dispassionate point of view. Look, okay, Nkrumah did some really terrible things. Dankwa may have done some really terrible things, but can we move beyond that? Because we cannot continue to saddle ourselves with the burden of history. That was their issue. That was their past. One thing we can agree on was that these people worked for our liberation. Before Nkrumah came, there were others who were interested in, whether even if they didn't want complete independence at that time, they looked at asserting the role of the African in the colonial administration. We have to give them that space. Other than that, we'll continue this argument, and there will never ever be a common ground. So yes, if you say I'm a peacemaker in that respect, I'm taking a look at it from that point of view, that at some point in time, something must give in.
Let's look at the president's speech, and he says that looking at the resources, the potentials, and the abilities that were in it in the Ghanaian, and that the country Ghana we could have achieved a lot more than we have.
Yeah, we could have if probably Nkrumah was still president.
What do you make about that aspect of the speech? It seemed to have captured all the headlines.
Yes.
We're not supposed to be poor. Ghana is.
But we've always said that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well,
we've just had terrible
even
leaders,
in the churches,
right?
if you are poor, they tell you to be rich.
I think it's the conundrum.
Have we just had terrible leaders, or we just have no sense of direction?
That question has really occupied my mind for a very long time, as to whether, I mean, of course, a lot of people say the problem of Africa is leadership. And of course, if you go around the world and you see what others have done with the Singapores and the Malaysias, leadership definitely plays an important role. But then people also say that where do the leaders come from? The leaders come from us. So the teacher who is looking at becoming an MP, when he's a teacher, he's complaining about how they are treated. When he gets into position of authority, what do we do? Even our own headmasters and people who find themselves in literal authority, how do they exert leadership? So is it an attitudinal problem? Is it a cultural problem that we must rethink? But one thing I know is that if you have a leader whose heart is in the right place, who has the political will and is willing to take some decisions, you can really turn around the nation. It's not rocket science, and others have done it. So probably it still boils down to the leadership. Yes, after 60 years, after all the resources that we've had, Ghana can be so much more than we currently are, and that we can all agree. And I went to Nigeria recently, and there was just some profound feeling as I was in the car and I was driving through the nation. Here's billions of dollars of resources. This is a country that has oil, that has a human capital that is great, the human resources, the population, but the poverty. So it was just a great impression for me. And I went to Singapore and I saw all the development and everything. And I was coming into the plane, I asked myself, is it really possible that we can build a nation that can be as industrialized? And my conclusion was that it is possible. And I have a poem and titled It's Possible. And if you don't mind, before we end the show, I'm going to share with you. So I think that yes, it's a leadership issue. I think that we started very well. When we started in the early days of our independence, there was such a belief in what we could do. The whole world was here for crying out loud. This was the first African country to win its independence. We were a torchbearer. If there was consensus, a bit of consensus among our political leaders, if we didn't have that acrimony between the Danko and the Buze tradition, if the Buze tradition, the Danko Buze tradition could have been a bit more conciliatory with the Nkrumah administration, if the Nkrumah administration could be a bit more magnanimous in victory, maybe this nation would have held for it. But sometimes you don't know who to blame, because as a president, there are several assassination attempts on your life. You become paranoid, you become isolated, you can't trust anybody. And for me, that is the sad thing about Nkrumah's administration. And I take a look at, and I think that, for example, the story of Akosombo Dam is one of the most powerful stories of our independence era that we should probably tell. I mean, Nkrumah was seen as, a radical, someone who was not interested in the West.
He was a non-conformist.
I think my father said to me once that he would have changed all the taps to milk.
I think that he was a man in a terrible
That was
hurry.
also part of the propaganda too.
Yes, of course there was a lot of propaganda.
Your dad bought into the propaganda. It was a Cold War propaganda.
He was
at
a
the time.
man in a terrible
Something
hurry.
that we copied from.
No,
the
no.
Cold
But
War
I
era.
think when they want to tell you something about, when they want to paint the Nkrumah picture, they tell you some of these stories so that you know how the kind of length the man would have gone for anything that he believed in.
He was a man in a terrible hurry. He had a vision of Ghana and Africa that he couldn't wait to get there. And he did so many things. Some of them failed, some of them succeeded. But definitely when we look at the timeline of our history, if any one person will stand out, and if we want to give a touch to one particular person, undoubtedly Nkrumah would hold that touch.
There's something else that I wanted us to discuss, but fortunately we've got Jefferson Saki to join us in this conversation, which is good. Jefferson Saki is with the Ghana at 60
Ghana
committee.
60 years on.
Oh, Ghana 60 years on. Thank you for not saying anything, Jefferson. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mamavi. Good morning, and happy anniversary to you and all the panelists.
Sure. First question, why didn't we see the president, the vice president, his wife, the other dignitaries also wearing the Ghana 60 years on cloth? We saw the former President Jerry John Rawlings and John Dramani Mahama wearing.
I think it is also important to consider what they were wearing. In fact, if you look at the attire of His Excellency the President itself, it is a very significant attire. It is a Northern Regional smock. If you look at the Vice President himself, he was wearing the fugu, also a Northern Regional a traditional wear. And so those are the very key things that we need to take into consideration even before we debate on why they didn't wear the anniversary cloth and all that. So the anniversary cloth, we said, is an anniversary cloth. And we have said over and over again that it is important for people to have it. It is a souvenir that you may need to have it so that you can always, 10, 20 years from now, you can say that you had it as a Ghanaian.
But Jefferson, what was the essence, Jefferson, of outdooring it just before the 6th March dates? And what better way of selling it, getting people to buy into it and to own it, really?
No, but you see, this is a year-long celebration, and that is what we have to take into consideration. It is a year-long celebration. You had the president, for example, 2 days ago, wearing a shirt with a local print, and he has a material. He has one of the anniversary cloths. But let's rewind years ago, 60 years ago, when Ghana gained her independence. What our forefathers were wearing on the day of the Declaration of Independence. Kwame Nkrumah himself, and together with the founders of the nation, were in a rich, traditional, Northern Regional smock. Fast forward 60 years on, you have a president who says that, look, it is so significant that we are able to tell our history in a very unique way. So I am coming to the Independence Square wearing a Northern Regional smock, representing our nation, representing us as a country. I think what would have been very difficult for us to defend if we had the president coming in wearing a suit, for that matter. But no, you have so many visitors coming in. And so we think that it is so important that whatever the president wears, whatever the vice president wears on that day, will speak volumes to what our tradition is, would rather define us as a nation than just one specific cloth that is meant only for the anniversary celebration, and that is it. We strongly believe that the president wearing the smoke or the president wearing something traditional together with the vice president would resonate well, would sound better, would rather speak the language that we want to communicate out there. If you want to consider, the main focus of the anniversary celebration, which is mobilizing for Ghana's future, and considering the fact that you are trying as much as possible to bring the entire country together under one umbrella, I think it is also very important. That is why we had all the culture, displayed from all 10 regions of our country, at the Independence Square on that day.
Okay.
So I think it's a legitimate question that you may want to ask why the president is not wearing the anniversary cloth. But look, this is a year-long anniversary celebration. Today, for example, there are programs lined up and all that. If there's a possibility you'll see the president, wearing the anniversary cloth.
Jefferson,
so
also,
for us, the significance is very key on what he wore that day.
Sure. Could we have done away with the Kumawood clay that was staged on the grounds?
No, you see, it was part of the anniversary celebration. In as much as you want to exhibit the culture of our country, you also want to give out a message out there. And I think it is so important to know that education has been the major, hallmark of the Akufo-Addo presidency. He campaigned on that. And so to be at the Independence Square, and of course the difficulties that parents go through in sending their kids to school. And so we thought that it was so key that we sound this in the ears of, every Ghanaian, that in the next academic year, for example, for the first time in the history of our country, public education, secondary education is going to be extremely free for new entrants. So we thought that it was a good opportunity to resonate, to give that information out, especially because you have the national camera on you, you have all the international, cameras focusing on our country. And of course, it is also history. It tells you, the skit that you saw tells you about the importance of education. That was actually spoken way back by the founders of our education of our country. You remember what Kwiju Agri said: if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate the nation.
Was it targeted, Jefferson? Was it targeted? Was it targeted at a specific group of persons? Because not everybody could understand the Akan language, and we had visitors also on the grounds as well. People coming not from only Ghana.
Yeah, but it was also very important to know that you want to be as local as possible. In an area like that. The majority of people really do understand this language. And after the skit was done, it was narrated for people to understand what that particular skit was all about. And so it gave out the meaning of the skit that they saw, the significance of the skit that they saw, and the message that the skit was actually putting out there in the minds of the general public.
Jefferson, so Azuma Nelson is our official torch bearer, correct?
Yes, for Greater Accra. So this is what is happening. The Independence Anniversary torch was laid yesterday. Azuma Nelson handed it over to the Ghana Traditional Council together with the minister, the Greater Accra Regional Minister. And the significance is that the anniversary torch is in the Greater Accra region. And so from now through to the 17th of March, this is where we're going to have the first phase of the anniversary. And so this evening, for example, there's going to be the International Gospel Concert with Don Moyne, with Darling Zedge, with Nathaniel Bassey, with our local Daughters of Glorious Jesus, Josh Lai, Sonny Badu. All of them are going to be gathering at the Independence Square to thank God and to praise God. And so when the anniversary torch moves to another region, another significant person from that region would have to receive the torch. So depending on which region the torch gets to, the person who receives it should be a significant citizen of that particular region, because at the end of the day, you want to send a clear information out there in the mind of the general public and in the mind of the world that this is where the focus is, what the region contributed in the struggle for independence, the success story of that region, the job opportunities in that region, the difficulties or the challenges, confronting that region, so that we can all rally as a nation in helping at least.
But Jefferson, one would have thought that the torch would rather end in the Greater Accra region, since this is the capital. And so before 7th of March, it would have gone around the country and ended here yesterday. What do you think about that?
Yes, you see, it's a circle, and this is what is going to happen. The torch was, the president had to light the perpetual flame, and it was through the perpetual flame that the Independence Anniversary torch was also lit. So what is going to happen is that it's going to crisscross the country, and then it's going to come back to the Independence Square on the 6th of March in 2018. And so it is a full circle that we're going to have at the end of the day, because you're looking at a year-long celebration. And yesterday being the beginning of the anniversary celebration itself, we thought that it was so important for it to move from Accra through to another region, and then it will come back to the Greater Accra region in 2018.
All right. Jefferson, thank you very much for speaking to us. But, I love to talk about money because I want you guys to have a lot more money. How much have you been able to raise so far?
this is a legitimate question, but we've said it over and over again. I mean, we're just done with the very first day of our anniversary proper. What is going to happen is that the National Planning Committee is going to meet. We're going to put our funds, finances together, how much we spend, how much is left, and of course, it's also very important to know that because it's a year-long celebration, the most important thing is that you need funds to at least start off the independence anniversary itself, the March past, which happened yesterday. And henceforth, what is going to happen is that we're going to meet and then make all these information available to the general public, because we've said it over and over again. We're going to be as transparent as possible. In fact, nobody can give you money without you recognizing the person. It's so important that you recognize each and every single individual who contributed to the success of this. Even
Definitely.
if it is one Ghana
do we know?
you have to say thank you to the person. I'm sure your next question will be, do you know how much is coming and all that?
No. My next question is, how much did we set aside to spend on yesterday's events, and how much did we actually spend?
Okay, so what is going to happen is that all these information will be made available. Every year, it is a norm that government allocates specific amount of money for the celebration of the independence anniversary celebration. Last year, for example, 4 million Ghana cedis was spent on the independence anniversary celebration. And we thought as a National Planning Committee that, considering the fact that it was just a one-day thing, that amount of money was extremely too much. And so we made sure that we were preparing a budget that did not even reach anywhere close to that amount of money.
So we prepared 2 million?
You're looking at, I can't give you a specific figure right now as I'm talking to you.
But we definitely spent less than 4 million.
Extremely less, extremely. It's nowhere close to that. It's nowhere close to that. I think it is very important for us to take this into consideration, that the 20 million Ghana cedis that we allocated for this 60th independence anniversary is not just for yesterday. It is a year-long thing. We're going to build the Heads of State Museum. We're building 60 libraries in 60 deprived communities, and with extra things that come along with it. Remember that the Jubilee Innovation Challenge has also been launched, to motivate our software developers. So it is very important to know that we are going to be very transparent to the Ghanaian people at the end of the day and make all the figures available to you. All
right. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Jefferson Saki, for making time to speak to us here on the AM show. And he speaks for the committee in charge of this whole celebration. Okay. So where do you want to pick?
I was just finding the questions you're asking quite interesting. Maybe we should move it and put it on the news. But yeah, I think that definitely the committee would at some point would have to account. I think that the Ghanaians have been watching them every single step of the way. And even in my dealings with them, you can see that they understand that there's a lot of spotlight on them. Considering the financial scandals that we've had in the past, they might not want to mar these activities with any financial scandals. So I hope that their books are in the right place, and when the time comes for probity and accountability,
Mr. Rollins' favorites,
they'll live up to the mark. But it's interesting that the two former presidents, Rollins and John Mahama, were in the anniversary cloth. I thought it was quite interesting, that they were in the anniversary.
People are making a big deal out of the fact that the presidents, the vice, his wife, they didn't wear it.
But was
it fair?
But was there any mass, rally for people to wear the anniversary cloth?
Not to wear, but at least we know that the cloth was launched. People were encouraged to own it.
But
people felt that this would have been a way of advertising it.
Do you have any?
No, I don't.
Oh, that's why you're talking this.
I haven't.
Do you have any?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you bought it?
That's a surprise. What's your color?
Green. Okay.
Oh, okay. Then
Well, I'm sure at some point I'll get one myself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, well, it would have been nice, but I don't think we should make a storm in a teacup out of it, But I found the president's attire quite peculiar. Initially, to be frank, when I saw the president, I was like,
I have it.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for me.
Is it that
I bought it.
Okay.
My money.
Well, I'll find out where to get one.
Wait. Should I tell you something about him?
Yes, please.
Okay, that'll be
I'm
after
curious.
the show. He never buys things like that. Okay, I
some
didn't say anything.
lady probably gave it to
So
him.
when you saw him in Fugu, you thought what?
No, my impression was that the Fugu was too plain initially.
Okay.
But I comparing to the colorful Fugus that we were used to with Mahama, I thought there could be a bit more,
So you think this Fugu was not too traditional?
Oh, not about it
looks
being,
too
He didn't
no,
say
not
no,
about
so
it
she
being
said the
traditional. I think that he's
plain,
known for these kind of fugu. You know, even in his campaign time, he had these blue, really right cool, but of course those are more or less like MPP colors. So probably he wanted to go for something a bit more neutral. And considering the issue he had with the cloth at the inauguration, in terms of how to and still read the speech. But I felt that, you know, anyway, I don't think that's the anniversary cloth too much of it. But you could have worn it this morning.
No, I have. It's with the tailor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't intend sewing it for the Independence Day celebration.
At some point, it's a whole year celebration, so we'll all
no, I
get out
intended
there.
using it as a Friday wear on the show, but
the
not
show,
necessarily because of.
Please get Mama V one. 6 yards.
No problem.
Yes.
If she will wear, she usually doesn't like traditional. You know.
Oh,
it's a
I'm
very.
sure once a while.
Chief.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
being
very
here.
much.
Thank you for your time.
It's always a pleasure.
Is it possible to stage the play here? I mean, aspect of it here on
if
our
we can
show.
have 170.
Oh, but
no. You don't need. We only need. We have room for, let's say, 6, 7 characters. Can we have?
Yeah, we can. We were actually on your sister station yesterday.
No, I mean, can you do something for us?
Yes,
this Friday.
Come with Nkrumah and JB.
This Friday.
This Friday.
Yeah, Nkrumah and JB Danko. That would be
this
good.
Friday.
This Friday.
This Friday.
This Friday. What time?
In the morning, like this.
Is item 13 assured?
Yeah, sure. It's assured.
How's your cocoa?
Is
Yeah,
it
it's
possible?
Oh,
is
it's
it
possible.
possible?
For anything for
What's
you.
the,
No, we're
the title
serious.
of the
We're
poem?
booking you.
Which one?
What
Yeah,
is
it is possible.
It is possible. Here we go with it.
So
It
you
is
repeat
possible.
after me when you hear. It is
Possible.
Oh.
Okay, sorry.
It is
Possible.
that we too can be among the high and mighty of this world, that our cities can be connected by bullet trains and ooze with magnificent buildings like pyramids touching the heavens, within a well-planned ambience of serenity, greenery, and timeliness. It is
Possible.
that we can be worth more than our gold and cocoa buried in our earth, and that our talent and passions and energies within us can be our single most important resource which we can harness for our progress. That the doctors, lawyers, architects, artisans, artists that we need to champion our development can come from within us. That the wealthy in our society will see the value in investing in the ideas and innovations of our young, rather than splashing millions in phantom properties in desert lands. So we too can create our Mark Zuckerbergs and Steve Jobs and Ali Babas. It is
Possible.
that we can create strong and efficient institutions, that the ordinary Ghanaian doesn't have to go through hell or pay a hell lot more to get a passport, a driver's license, or a business registration, or any such public service. That when you press the switch, the lights will come on. When you turn the tap, the water will flow. When you heap your rubbish, the collectors will come. That when you fall ill, the ambulance will appear. That the qualification you need to get a job, a contract, a scholarship is not who you know, but what you know. It is
Possible.
It is possible that we can fulfill the dreams and aspirations of our founding fathers, the dreams of John C. and Mensa Saba to protect our lands from exploitations, the dreams of Park Grant for the flourishing of local enterprise, the dreams of J.B. Danko for a free and just society, the dreams of Kwame Nkrumah for an accelerated growth of Ghana and Africa, the dreams of the thousands of people who work to secure our liberation. It is
Possible.
that after 60 years of nationhood, through the triumphs and tribulations, through the moments of great hope to the moments of despair, through the republics by the gun and the regimes by the constitution, through this journey that we have been, it is possible that Ghana can be much more and so much more than we currently are. If we will all play our part and play it well, we can build a country that does not beg the sympathy of others, but commands the respect of many. It is
Possible.
Oh, great.
Amazing.
Thank you very much.
We'll have our JB and Nkrumah on Friday, God willing.
On Friday,
and
God
there's
willing.
definitely item 13 on Roland.
An anniversary cloth.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you, Chief
Thank you
Momen.
very much, Mama Bia.
We're
Thank you once
starting our International Women's Day conversations today here on the show. We've got an amazing story to tell you from up north. And from today till Friday, we'll be telling you different stories produced by Justice Baidu. We'll tell you some of the things that the amazing women are up to. And we've got a guest in studio. So a good conversation again here on the show up next.
Do stay on.